Welcome to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast where innovation isn't just an ideal, it's a way of life. I'm your host and creator of the Innovate, Disrupt, or Die newsletter, Danny Nathan. Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. This week's guest is Bri Brennan. Bri, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Danny. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Bri, let's kick things off with, the relatively simple stuff. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what your relationship to the world of innovation is, and we'll see how the conversation unfolds from there.
Okay, awesome. So I've been in the world of technology for probably the greater part of 15 years, and I think it's always been in an innovative space. I've kind of been chasing the what's possible, the art of what's possible since I dipped my toe into innovation, which really started with technology. My current role is Chief Innovation Officer at OnTrak Health. And in that role, it's really largely focused on strategic partnerships, our product, and then the infusion of the innovation with our go-to-market strategy.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about OnTrak Health, what you all do, and sort of where you find the greatest opportunities for innovation.
Oh boy, innovation. Innovation is everywhere. And I think that we'll probably get into that a couple of times throughout our conversation.
Awesome.
Like, just to start with the elevator pitch, like who we are, what we do, and why it matters. OnTrak is a value-based behavioral healthcare company, and we are specifically set out to look for people who have unmet healthcare needs. And through our technology, which we have named officially our advanced engagement system, we bring them into care and ultimately improve their health outcomes and save the system, like the healthcare system, a ton of money.
Interesting. All right, Bri, for the uninitiated amongst us, what is value-based behavioral health?
So a value-based behavioral healthcare company is a company that delivers services that are measurable from both a clinical and like personal health outcomes perspective,
Okay.
but also deliver savings for the healthcare system. And then there's another prong to value, which is patient satisfaction, right? So we
That's a
can
good one.
look at the triangle of how can we best deliver care to hit all of those 3 points. And that's ultimately the value equation.
Interesting. So you're changing the relationship that people have with healthcare to make it better, faster, cheaper.
That's exactly what it is.
Awesome. All right. That sounds super interesting.
That's the flywheel. I love it. Okay. Yeah. We're on the
You're
same.
welcome to steal it, please. Awesome. So you've been in your role for a couple of years now. Am I correct there?
Yeah. I've been with OnTrak for a little over 5 years now.
Okay.
Served in a couple of roles, but really where I found myself being able to make the most impact from an innovation perspective is when I really formally started working for the product team.
Interesting. So when you joined the company, then I assume based on what you've said that you knew that technology and innovation were a point of interest for you, and you've been sort of finding your way closer and closer to that with OnTrak?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that drew me to OnTrak beyond the mission, and I think that mental health and improving people's mental health, and as a result, their like quality of life, is a mission that everybody can get behind today. What also drew me into the company was 5 years ago, they already had AI systems in place that were part of the operating structure of the company. They were doing AI before AI was cool. And so I knew that I was going to be joining a company that was really like forward thinking. And as I learned more and more about the company before I joined, I realized that there is a culture of innovation here. It's actually part of what drives the business flywheel. So strategic partnerships and innovation is something that is part of the culture, deeply supported and integral to really our growth engine.
Awesome. All right. I love that you just threw a culture of innovation on the table because it's a phrase that I end up using all of the time. And it's something that I personally believe has a huge impact on a company's ability to be innovative. So,
Well,
talk to me.
let me, Danny, sorry to interrupt, but
No, please.
I do read your newsletters also.
Oh, awesome.
And so I know that recently, I think maybe it was February or April time period, you put up this really cool 4 quadrant, like you have to be able to deliver autonomy if you really want to get disruptive innovation within a company,
Yes.
right? Okay. So that resonated with me a lot
Oh,
because
that's fantastic.
because here at OnTrak, one of the things that we do and protect and have really intentionally orchestrated is we have a center for research and innovation in AI that is able to live separate but congruent with our day-to-day operational infrastructure.
Interesting. Okay. You're throwing
Are we
so much on the
jumping way
table
too
that I'm
far ahead? Okay.
No, you're not jumping too far ahead at all. I'm trying to sort of keep track of everything you're dropping so that I make sure that I don't miss it in conversation. So there's two things that I want to hit on. One, I want to learn more about what a culture of innovation means to you and to the organization. And then I would love to learn more about what you've just described with the AI innovation practices and how that aligns to the broader company mission.
So let's take it in chunks, maybe.
Sure.
I think a lot of people find it relatively easy to think about innovation as it relates to technology. So let's just
Yes.
start there.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about like things that are maybe not software, but are technologies, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of room for innovation in those spaces as well.
Absolutely.
So, from a technology perspective, we have intentionally designed a tech stack that is sort of hits what we think to be the most critical things to support ongoing and continuous growth innovation. One is our technology stack was developed very specifically to be able to integrate. So, and sort of like an open style platform. And I'll tell you in a minute why that's important. The
Okay.
second is that our everything we build on this foundation that's open is built with the lens of being extensible. So, a particular use case that we might be thinking about needs to be able to then sort of adapt and be usable in other instances.
That's awesome.
And there's a lot of art to that. That is a very meticulous or very thoughtful way of doing something, right? It's sort of like to start broad in order to be able to, whatever. It's like vectors,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Start
So
with
then
likely and then be able to like, yeah,
right.
branch off into other use cases.
Right. I can only imagine then that the manner in which your tech stack is built plays a deep role in your partnership opportunities. I mean, you mentioned extensibility there. I'm assuming then that as you're looking for partnership opportunities and companies to potentially integrate either their technology into your stack or yours into theirs, that becomes part of the conversation.
100%. I mean, like you hit the nail on the head. So, what's really fun about the work that I get to do every day is that I get to lead strategic partnerships. And from a technology perspective, that I I'm actually paid to come to work every day and look for new tools, use cases, and technology that we could bring into our infrastructure that help to supercharge or turbo boost whatever part of our operations it is that we're trying to get better at. And because we intentionally built and orchestrated, architected our technology to be extensible, what we do is we think about it like our CIO, our Chief Information Officer. He is about a best of brand or best of breed model.
Okay.
So we're not trying to build everything. We can't possibly do that and be really, really excellent at it. But there are people out there who are best of breed and have created tools and technologies that are the best of breed. So we seek out those partnerships, bring them in, and then really what the magic happens is like, how do you integrate it? How do you infuse it? How do you like take advantage of the information that's possible?
Interesting. So you're starting effectively on second base already, Bri, because you're dealing with an organization that understands that building everything from the ground up may not be the fastest or most effective way to achieve an innovative outcome. And you're actively looking for opportunities to combine your superpowers with other people's superpowers.
Precisely.
Interesting.
For us, what runs the world for a healthcare company, what runs your day to day is something called an electronic health record. It's
Hmm.
really like your system of record that keeps all the information that you want to about a person and their health status, and it like generates claims so you can be reimbursed. When you have a really good partner or EHR that also has an open system, just imagine what you can do then about bringing insights in from the external world. Or in our case, we go out and seek research to come and build into our model that sort of supports the patient's journey and their record within our EH.
Gotcha. So you're using the EHR as sort of like the CRM starting point for
Yeah,
understanding the needs of every given patient.
totally. When we were like a fledgling company, 20 years ago, we actually were started on a CRM and we were building it was essentially an EHR ourselves. And
Interesting.
then as technology emerged and there's a lot of rules and regulations to protect people's information for good reason, there was no way to keep up with all of the rules. So for us, it's best to use a company who already knows how to play by the rules
Okay.
and has an infrastructure that allows for us to bring in tools.
Got it. And I would imagine then that that offers you some freedom by having, I don't want to say not having to worry about, because obviously privacy is top of mind,
Yeah,
especially in any medical organization. But if you're dealing with an outside EHR company that is responsible for maintaining that privacy, does it then offer you some freedom and flexibility about how you think about utilizing the data in interesting and hopefully insightful ways?
absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that you all have sort of your internal AI innovation team. What does that look like and how does it relate to the broader business? I mean, is there edict to innovate specifically within the AI space almost regardless of the health pursuit, or how do they fit into the bigger picture?
Well, okay, so pretty much yes to everything you said.
Okay.
So let's talk about the structure of the group. They're called the CARES team. And what they're doing is clinical artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence research. And we partner with, so the way that we set this team up is they are a connection or tangentially connected to our product, our services, and our outcomes. Really our growth engine, right? And how they're organized is a group of the best researchers from the best universities. So it's actually we're partnering with a university.
Oh, interesting.
So we use their research team and doctoral students to come in and help answer questions that we have about our data to get smarter. Because
Fascinating.
as you know, especially in AI, you have to be very intentional about not building in biases and then layering biases on biases, right? And so, as a company, one of our strengths in the marketplace and really uniquely different about us, because we've been around for so long, and as a behavioral health company, we actually have access to all the claims for members, not just their mental health claims, right? So we actually
Oh,
get to
wow.
see all the full scope, usually like 18 months before we even kind of like knew of you, before you popped into our system. And then we
Hmm.
carry all that information through another 12 months. But what's very unique about our methodologies or what we've been able to do over time is identify the persona of the person who would most likely benefit from our services.
Okay.
And we also have the ability to predict the likelihood of a behavioral health condition that is undertreated or untreated or undiagnosed. So when I gave you the elevator pitch in the beginning and I said we identify and engage people with unmet health needs, we are truly able to, through our machine learning, identify core service gaps that are missing from health or your treatment plan.
Interesting. So, Bri, help me understand. How are you discovering patients or customers that would engage with OnTrak? Because what I think I'm understanding is that you're looking at patient records for patients that may not be on track customers and effectively reaching out to them and saying, hey, we think you might have a problem that we can help with?
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. No one's an OnTrak Health customer until they get a phone call and they get invited into a program that's been sponsored by their health plan. So, like, hey, Danny, do we have a program for you? Let's talk about what your goals are, right? I mean, just for a minute, think about how often your phone rings with an unknown number. How often are you going to pick it up, right? How often are you, like, how skeptical are you going to be when somebody says, I have a free, really great program for you that's going to improve your health? And you're like, no.
Right. So then, okay, yes, that would exactly be my reaction was no,
Get
thank you,
my
goodbye.
reaction a lot.
So then are you partnering with insurance companies to lend credibility, or how do you convince me, who you've called out of the blue, that you are legit, that you have an offering that might benefit me, and that, it's not a scam?
There is, yeah, there's a whole process behind that. But yes, our customers are your health insurance company. So think about
Okay.
whoever it is that's sponsoring your health plan benefits. And so there's obviously a formal partnership there. So people who are skeptical or like don't have like brand recognition of who we are
Right.
know who their health plan is. And
Right.
so there's a way to demonstrate the credibility of who we're
Got it.
calling on behalf of. People are still skeptical. I mean, that's part of our job is to figure out how to make people comfortable when they get a phone call out of the blue.
Bri, this is all fascinating. Let's circle back to the innovation part of the conversation for a moment here. There's a couple things that I want to hit on. One, you called out a culture of innovation earlier. How did the culture of innovation get built within the organization, and how does it get propagated amongst everybody who doesn't have innovation in their title? Like, what does that mean to somebody at OnTrak that isn't the chief innovation officer or somebody on your team, for example?
So for as long as I can remember having worked for the company, from day one you get asked why. So it's like this constant um, experience of having to think through and be curious about a problem or why something happens is instilled upon everybody, right? Like heavily groomed into us, which is like, is actually why. So if I bring a problem, why is it a problem? Why do we know it exists? The second is data. So people in this, everyone in the company, no matter what their job is, needs to find out sort of the factual elements behind a statement, a question, or a proposal. And what that does is it gets people curious. And I think curiosity is what fuels innovation.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you're in the enviable position of not having to then convince your peers and other people in the organization that they should be thinking about innovation. Does that then extend into people's ability to take risks, to try things, to ask forgiveness, not permission?
Right.
What is the impact on the day to day beyond asking why?
Well, from the executive leadership team through all other levels in our company, we sort of have a mantra or a saying is that we are a learning organization. So again, back to the bias or what you think you were probably wrong about because we're
Yeah.
always getting smarter, but it's really about always getting smarter. And so, yeah, that may have worked one time, but doesn't work now, right? What we have, one of the other things that really helps us continue to innovate is like celebrate and support new ideas. We have processes in place to try things out, sort of like in beta pilot
Huh?
testing. And so we fail really quickly if we're going to fail, but like we're like, okay, cool, we learned something from it.
Amazing. Can you tell me more about that process, Bri? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, so it happens to me frequently. I find really cool, maybe not like maybe sort of early stage companies that have really cool tech, like they've
Mhm.
solved a problem. And I'm like, yeah. So for example, like call navigation, such a cool concept. I talked to you earlier about how challenging it could be to call like cold call somebody up and be like, oh, we're not really selling you anything. We just want to offer you like healthcare. People are like, no,
Yeah,
like,
no, I don't believe you.
not today. So we found this really cool tech. that has the potential to do some really sophisticated, I'm going to call GPS, right?
Okay.
There's mandatory things to hit. Then if somebody has an objection, the call GPS kind of gives you some ways to overcome objections, right? So think about how conversations can branch in so many directions. It was really intended to give us this navigation. We brought it in, we piloted it, we ended up not rolling it out to the enterprise. And it's not that it won't ever work. It didn't work yet, right? Because there are certain things where I think for us, the biggest learning from that failure was that without really strong like process or methodology, you really can't develop AI to support it.
Hmm.
And so the span of conversation was too broad for AI to support.
Okay. Interesting.
And so there's like a balance, right? Do we want to have more? Do we want to script
Right.
these conversations more? Right. So then it's like, okay, let's try that out and see how that works. And then, yeah.
Got it. So how much of the innovation work that you all are doing, developing, experimenting with is created are things or technologies or opportunities that are created in-house versus the kind of partnership opportunities with, as you described, other early stage companies, other technologies that might be beneficial? Where does that kind of break down?
Yeah. I don't have like a percent split for you, but I would
Sure.
say about 50-50.
Okay. Interesting. So then what types of things are you experimenting with internally, and how do those get championed internally, and what does the experimentation process look like for something that you're developing in-house as opposed to something that you're partnering with from outside?
Yeah. So a lot of the in-house work that we do really is through our data scientist medical economics teams,
Okay.
where really their work is around like becoming more and more and more precise about the different types of personas that we work with and who we benefit most. So tons of math calculation, really like machine learning algorithms. Some of the other really neat things that happen internally are, I'm going to say, incremental innovation on a partner that we brought in. That happens a lot. Like again, because we find partners who are extensible. We brought them in for a use case. We start using them. We're like, oh, wait a minute. We could actually do this over here. So there's like a beautiful marriage between using an outside vendor, but also improving on the product ourselves. So one really cool example, this is a very kind of known product or tool or application of natural language processing and Gen AI, which is like note taking and transcription. So in the healthcare space, taking a note of a session is burdensome. It's inefficient. And sometimes it's actually wrought with bias. A lot of people don't think about that, but our recall is actually usually fails us and then is like actually influenced by our bias. So having notes to transcribe a call and give us a summary is really important because from an efficiency perspective, from a precision, like from an accuracy perspective, but also for audit and compliance reasons, it's really important to have.
Then I'd imagine that that gives you a huge data pool to pull from as you're thinking about how to train new models and what types of experiments you could run. Or is that not the case due to privacy issues?
So what you can do then with it is so the build off of it is now you can flag keywords in conversation that are meaningful to the person and their circumstance. So for example, if we're having a conversation, right? And I'm your patient, and you know, one of the things that is influencing my mental health is the fact that I'm like isolated, very lonely, right? The word alone in conversation, generally speaking, might not really mean anything, but that word in context to me is very important in that. So it flags these key trigger words that help for our clinical team to guide pro- treatment plans, to guide problem solving, to guide work that they do.
So your platform is doing the identification that in this context, Bri, you're lonely, that the word alone comes up often, and it alerts me as the healthcare provider that that's a cue I should be listening for. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Precisely. And then the next stage that we built on this was, you are the clinician, right? You have 50 people you're working with, right? It's a little difficult to manage your time outside of just like what appointments you have scheduled for therapy, right? But we know there's a process that each patient is supposed to go through, right? There's like the start process of treatment, and then there's like the generalization of it, and then there's like getting ready to do this on your own. And each of them have different activities, different goals and milestones. So not only can our system flag keywords that are being said in the course of a conversation, but they can also assign a relative importance to them. And then it becomes a stack rank on what's the most important activities for our clinicians to do at any point in time.
Wow. So you're effectively guiding the clinician's treatment path, or augmenting it, I guess might be a better way to put it, to
Yep.
help them identify the most salient things that would be beneficial for that particular patient and kind of bubbling them to the top.
Across their entire caseload of patients.
Right.
It's we call it next best action. So it is not telling clinicians what to do, but it is bringing the information forward so that they can understand within the context of their caseload and the individuals what truly is the most important thing to do at any point in time.
That's really cool. I love hearing about these things because it's so interesting. Everybody's talking about AI these days, and the number of ways that it can be implemented and applied is just mind-blowing. And so it's always interesting to hear how people are using it and what they're doing with it that I haven't heard of before. So, Bri, talk to me a little bit about kind of what your team looks like and what is your support system in the role of innovator within an organization that sounds like it's pretty forward facing to begin with.
Yeah. So the my team and support looks very much like a traditional marketing team.
Okay.
So really, like, there's three large groups of work, of bodies of work that I oversee. So one of them is product, one is strategic partnerships, and the other is marketing.
Okay.
So we do
Interesting.
have a marketing team that supports the work that we do, and that looks like everything from digital to content creation. Then there is a team that's really supporting product and product innovation. So there's like product ops keeping the lights on, making sure that all the systems are running. And then there's like new product development, and then there's product innovation. And so the product innovation team is usually it has a dotted line to our data science teams,
Mhm.
our research teams, and then it's a group of really, really strong business analysts. So we have found that business analysts really for us in our company are probably the strongest skill set to have to innovate on product, because they understand the way the systems are, and they understand the way the data is used and leveraged then to, return whatever it is that we're trying to build at the time.
You mentioned both product innovation and new product development. How do those teams relate to one another? I mean, a lot of folks would sort of hear that and say, well, aren't they the same?
Yes, except for when we talked about the difference between giving a team the autonomy. So we're talking about a Skunks Works team who are challenging what we think that we know from our product. So that's really where the innovation comes, which they're not necessarily on a sprint schedule that is to iteratively improve upon a system or a process. They are out saying, what haven't we learned yet? What do we think we know that might be wrong? Or where can we take this next?
Interesting. So, in innovation parlance, effectively what you're saying is you have a sustaining innovation team and a disruptive innovation team that are separate but kind of running at different things.
Yeah, I want to call them a disruptive innovation team. We're almost there.
Fair. And whether you call them that or not, but the
We're
distinction is
almost at
interesting.
disrupting the behavioral health market. We're like this close.
Interesting. Interesting.
Actually, one of the things I will say though, I think there is something that is really uniquely different about, so our disruptive innovation team um, launched about 6 to 9 months ago a mental health digital twin. And this is
Saw that
where
on
I
your website.
really think we can talk about maybe more disruptive innovation. Because this gets us to the point of massively precision based care, right? And such predictability that mental health has never been in. Most people who have experience with mental health have like one of two experiences, right? Really hard to break into, right? To even navigate, to know how to take advantage of. But when you're there, like, maybe sort of unstructured talk therapy, I think is how people think. Or people think like digital apps, self-guided type of, and if anywhere you look, you see people saying, well, Chat GPT is my new therapist. Okay. Right. I actually think that in any way that somebody starts to search for help is the right way to get started. Getting started is better than not. But in a mental health digital twin, just like every other digital twin, it is a orchestration of massive amount of data inputs that creates a like me or like Danny persona. And we are able to then test out or predict your path to the best outcomes for you.
Is that based on a snapshot in time? I mean, you take this one moment and go, this is Danny, but it's Danny as he sits at, noon today? Or does it continue to consume data over time to create an evolving digital twin?
If it's going to be a real digital twin, it has to be as dynamic as Danny is.
Right.
So as close to real time as possible is how relevant in real time the digital twins are. In our program, unlike maybe this is where it becomes a little disruptive, because I think folks think, okay, I go to my therapist once a week or I go to my therapist once a month. How much information can you possibly have on me? Right. But in a program like OnTrak's program, have multiple as frequently as is good for the member touch points with them, that all the information, whether it's Danny reported or health system reported, are feeding into your avatar and updating in as real time as possible. So like I might send you a note today just to check in on how you're doing towards your goals, right? That information comes into the twin. I might send you a structured, like a depression screen, let's say. Your filling that out comes into the digital twin, right? If you went and refilled a prescription or you went and got a shot or saw your doctor for whatever reason, that information is coming in. And then there's also things like your social needs. So where you live tells us a lot about potentially your health, what health issues you may have. They call them social determinants of health or health related social needs. We know that people's mortality rates are actually very closely calculated to the zip code in which they live in because of their access to certain type of resources. So that information and those risks come into our system as well. And then what's really neat about it, particularly I think like from a women's health perspective, which is on like the cusp of a lot of new information and learning, there is a ton of research that's out there. It's just like really hard for a single person to consume all of this information.
Right.
And then apply it very specifically to like a persona. But that's the cool thing about AI and the ability to manage data these days is we can take the research that's been done, connected to like a correlative outcome or a predictable outcome, and generate the systems that tell us what's most likely to happen.
It's so cool.
It's really cool. The digital twin is so far ahead that it's quite difficult to use that as our primary pitch in what makes us different, because it is so futuristic. The concept of precision medicine is not futuristic. And ultimately, I think that's what a digital twin does. But there's a lot of, I would say that we're still in like the 2%, like in the innovation curve when it comes to AI and its capabilities. We're like in the 2%, right? Early adopters, like super forward thinking people. Like it's going to be a while before something like a digital twin becomes like, I could walk into a room and say, oh, we've got a mental health digital twin, and people kind of like understand it. Otherwise, there's a ton of education, a lot of skepticism, and a tremendous amount of reservation And I find that a lot in mental health in particular. It's interesting that folks are very hands off when it comes to like mental health. Like, oh, it's such a personal experience.
Mhm.
So is diabetes. Like everything about anybody is so very personal.
Yes.
Like we shouldn't, what we do ourselves is harm is if we put something like mental health up on a shelf and say that's too personal. So then we don't study it.
Bri, you're starting to hint at some of the challenges that you face in innovation, particularly in the mental health space. What are some of the other things that are challenging in your role? Be it, the brass tacks of skepticism of technology or organizational challenges. What are the things that you find yourself frustrated by? That you're comfortable sharing.
Okay. I should have actually, you know what? If I was prepping for this call, that should have been the one thing that so I think that one of the things that is probably the most challenging when it comes to our organization and what we do is to manage the balance between what technology can do and the role of humans.
Where do you find the balance point and the challenges that come up? And where do you all draw the line between the human and the technology in order to ensure that people are comfortable?
Yeah. So the technology piece that's a challenge right now is, well, anytime you use the word AI in healthcare, everybody wants to ensure, and rightfully so, that you have systems in place to control and protect information that, you know, however, sharing with you any of your other technology providers are also ensuring the safety. And then there's like a concept, I think, also of like, oh, well, your systems are getting smarter just because you're inputting other people's data into it. Is it really you getting smarter? Which is, have you heard of that before? Have you like, don't add this information into a generative language model because it's getting smarter on behalf of your input.
That's fair. I'm of two mindsets there. I mean, on the one hand, you have to input information into some sort of AI or generative system in order for it to better serve the needs that you're asking it to serve. But at the same time, I understand the sensitivity to broad model training on personal data or personal information. And I think a lot of that, I mean, you nodded to it earlier in terms of education of sort of the broader population and understanding when you say that you're training something on my data, what exactly does that mean? And what is the impact on me and on my data and on where it goes? So yes, I understand what you're driving at. And I think that a long ways to go before people start to feel really comfortable about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and your experiences, all of them for better or worse, are really valuable in the context of learning more about healthcare delivery.
Absolutely. I, Bri, this has been fascinating, and I feel like we could keep talking about it for hours. First, is there anything that we missed? Anything that is poignant to your perspective on innovation or your role in the world of innovation that I just completely didn't ask you?
No, I think if I was walking in here today and with a single message, if you want to build really strong technologies that are going to last the test of time and be able to keep up with how fast the market is moving, make sure you are disciplined around three key points. And it is extensibility, integration, and scalability. Without those three as your core foundation, you're going to have a really hard time adapting and moving as quickly as you need to stay relevant in the market.
Ooh, that's fantastic advice. I might have to pick your brain on that later. Bri, do you have any favorite resources for sort of learning about or keeping up with innovation? Do you have favorite books or websites that you visit regularly or anything like that that might benefit other folks who are listening?
Yeah, well, I read your news article every single week. So
Thank
Innovate,
you.
Disrupt or Die. No, because it's like what I really like about the way that you do this is like exploring technologies, but in a very pragmatic way. One of the really cool things that differentiates what you're doing is a business forward approach to innovation there's a lot of people who talk about it, right? Or conceptually talk about it, but what actually happens and what happens when businesses adopt technology is a really important piece of information to share with the broader population, and maybe makes it a little bit easier for adoption to move quicker.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I listen to a ton of femtech
Okay.
podcasts, and one of my favorite is called Mother Dash Podcast. They are like leveraging groundbreaking data and science to deliver products that are going to absolutely transform the way that digital health or the way that healthcare is delivered. Right now, I'm really keen in the femtech space because there's so much opportunity to deliver products for women in the healthcare market.
Awesome. Bri, where can people find you if they want to connect or pick your brain on some of the things that you've brought up? What's the best place to find you?
Find me on LinkedIn, and I'm one of those rare people that if you reach out and send a note to, I'm actually very likely to have a conversation with you, or at least check out your profile and find something that's, that's something that I find intriguing or something we have in common.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Bri, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an utterly fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
All right, Danny, I hope we have a chance to come back in 6 months and give some updates on what's next.
That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. Join us again for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe at innovatedisruptordie.com. That's all, folks.